The brutal death of a 4-year-old girl last weekend sparked outrage and sympathy nationwide. While those accused must now answer for their alleged crimes, the death of Bella has put the issue of abuse under a microscope yet again. Sexual, emotional, and physical abuse are topics that are too often seen as taboo. Whether it's a well-kept family secret or a community in denial, the issue of abuse in children exists largely under a cloud of secrecy. Welcome to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. In this society, there are more bystanders who have taken that stance that it's not my business. Meanwhile, neighbors, siblings, cousins, and children are abused. The silence and failure to act can lead to years of trauma or even worse, death. When young Bella was abused allegedly at the hands of those charged with looking after her, it reignited a decades-old problem in this community. Tonight on The Record, we talk to those who have lived it, investigate and counsel the abused. Our topic, surviving the horror of abuse. Don't go anywhere. Our conversation begins on the other side of this one. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. And welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer, and tonight we are discussing surviving the horror of abuse. Nelson Mandela once said that the true character of a society is revealed in how it treats its children. Many Bahamian families have kept abuse towards children silent for years in the hopes of saving face of the abuser. However, there are more mental consequences for the victim as they suffer years of dealing with it. Our guest is a survivor of abuse from a young age, she says. In this segment, she will help us understand the horrors of not having anyone there to listen to your cries or having family members who attempt to stifle your story. We've decided not to show her face in this segment for her own safety. Welcome to our show. And I want to start out by having you tell us about your story and really how it has affected your life.
Good morning, Mr. Sawyer. Thank you for having me. Well, my story, unfortunately, is not unlike countless other stories in this country. I was sexually abused by my father. The first memory that I have, I was 7 years old. And prior to that happening, like every daughter in a normal father daughter relationship, I loved my father. I was a daddy's girl. I worshiped him. He was my hero. And once the abuse started, while I had an off feeling about it, like most children, I didn't know yet that it was wrong. I hadn't been taught prior to that about good touch, bad touch, that sort of thing. And so the way that he came on to me with the molestation was from a place of, I'm doing this because I love you. And that went on for a few years. And I had informed my mother finally when I was 11 years old because I couldn't take it anymore at that point and I wanted help. And so for me, my mother would have been the one to help me, but it didn't turn out that way. The first time that I had come to her at 11, she did not believe me, or rather, she said that she did not believe me. And several months later, I came to her again. And at that point, she said to me that I would just have to put up with it until I turned 18 and was able to move out of the house on my own. And from that point, the relationship with my mother began to deteriorate significantly.
Now, I know from your story, you eventually would have reached out to the crisis center. You would have confided in somebody there, according to what you've told us. And then they intervened. Tell us what happened when an intervention actually took place.
Well, that intervention took place years later at 15. And that's because I had attempted suicide. Prior to that, several other family members of mine, older family members of mine, became aware of what was happening. And their response to me was to not say anything, keep my mouth shut. If I say anything, it will cause a problem for the family. It will break up the family. And I went to a priest that thought the same thing, basically. And so at 15, I had attempted suicide. I was in hospital on a psychiatric hold for 3 days. When I was released from hospital, I knew that I still wanted help and I wanted out. I wanted away from my father. I wanted away from the environment because the entire environment in my home was toxic. It was abusive all the way around. And so I began calling the crisis center anonymously. And the lady that I spoke to, I called 3 times, ended up speaking to the same lady 3 times. And she was great. She was actually the first adult who actually listened to me. And I confided in her. I told her what was happening to me. And by the third call, I had finally told her my name and the school that I was attending. And the next day, police and social workers showed up to my school to interview me.
You were then removed from the home and an investigation started. But what happened?
Well, once the investigation happened, my father was barred from having any contact with me whatsoever, which was great. My mother, however, was allowed to see me, but only in the presence of a social worker. So our visits were supposed to have been supervised. But on one particular day, my mother came to my school, which she was not supposed to do, but she did. And she told me that if my father had gone to prison, she was going to kill herself. And that her blood would be on my hands, and it would be my fault that she would be dead. And at that time, while there was significant deterioration between my mother and I still loved my mother. And I wanted her acceptance, I wanted her affection. And oddly enough, I wanted to protect my mother. It should have been the other way around, but that was my mindset at the time. And so I recanted my story, and I no longer was willing to cooperate with the investigation. And so the charges against my father was subsequently dropped, and I was sent back home.
You would have returned to the home, but years later you left. You told me after growing conflicts with your father. And now, fast forward, there are, according to what you allege, your family members have accused you of being crazy, having a mental issue, making all of this up. Is that correct?
Yes, several family members, not all of them, but there are quite a few family members who have, over the years, since I was young, like 12, 13, had painted me as someone who was deceitful, mentally unstable, and trying to destroy the family. And so that narrative from them, has carried on to this present day.
How is
So
this?
I do not have.
Go ahead, finish.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I do not have a relationship with like 80% of my family.
How has this affected your life? How has this really molded who you are in some ways? You know, what has this done to you?
Well, first of all, I developed very serious anxiety, very severe anxiety. I still have an anxiety disorder to this day, by the way. I developed an eating disorder. I struggled with depression. I had a very low self-esteem, a very warped sense of self-image. I had relationship problems. I had problems with authority. I had a lot of self-hate because I blamed myself for what was happening to me. And I had also blamed myself for the fact that my relationship with my mother imploded.
Do you feel as if you were let down by some of the institutions, some of the individuals who should have been there to help you? Do you feel as if had people done something when you cried out for help that maybe the situation might have been different? Do you feel that you were let down and that the system failed you?
Oh, absolutely. Not the justice system, but my family failed me. The church failed me. Had my mother done what she was supposed to have done when I first came to her at 11 years old, none of what had happened after that would have taken place. And so she was the first one to fail me. And then the other adults who were in the same age group as my mother, who were aware of the abuse, who also didn't say anything and really were bent on silencing me, they failed me. And then going to the church and getting no help from the head priest that I had spoken to, he failed me. And so there were just years of massive failure by adults. And so, of course, if any of them had done what they were supposed to do, the outcome for me would have been much different.
How do you respond, though, to your family members who say you have made all of this up? You have a mental issue. This is not true. You're trying to destroy their family, because those, according to you, are the responses of some members of your family. What do you say to them? Those members of the family say this is untrue. You're making all of this up.
Well, let me be clear about something. And I say this with no shame whatsoever. I do have a mental health problem. I struggle with anxiety and depression. I've never ran from that. I've never tried to hide that. So that is actually true. But there is a difference between having a mental health issue and being a liar. Those two things are not one and the same at all. And what do I say to them? Mr. Sawyer, honestly, I have nothing to say to them. My story has already been corroborated. And so it's not as if they don't believe me, you know. They know the truth. They have just never wanted me to come out with the truth.
All right.
And
Go ahead.
unfortunately, those members of my family who have taken that stance are more concerned about family image than they are about the truth, which is not uncommon. Most families take that stance.
I want to ask you, as we attempt to wrap up, though, there are people out there who may be watching this who may suspect, know of, be victims of, and are looking at this and don't know what to do, are afraid to speak or don't know where to turn. What advice would you give to anyone, whether they know of it, whether they suspect it, whether they are victims, even if they are perpetrators and say, you know what, maybe I need help? What advice would you give?
Okay, well, those are different categories. So
Yeah, let's deal with the victims and those who know first.
Okay. For the victims and for the survivors of abuse, the first thing I would say to them is that what has happened to them or is presently happening to them is not their fault at all. And I would advise them to keep going to someone until someone pays attention. Now, that is a lot easier said than done, I admit. But don't give up, because you deserve the help. You deserve to be living in a free and safe space. And so keep pushing for that until you get that.
What about people who are out there who may suspect or know of it and just, they don't want to get involved or don't know how to get involved?
Okay, well, for those who are aware of abuse and don't report it, you are part of the problem. Absolutely. It is up to us as adults to keep children safe, and not just our children, all children. And it really, we say that we care about our future. We care about the future of this country. The future of this country lies in our children. And so if we're not protecting our children, we really don't care about the future of this country. And so we have to develop the mindset and the attitude of that child across the street deserves protection. It's up to us. And so call the police, go to the police anonymously, go to social services, and report suspected abuse or abuse that you are aware of.
I want to thank you for your bravery, for coming on and telling this story and sharing with us. It certainly has been riveting, even prior to coming on when you and I spoke. It really, has affected all of us. And we're talking about the sexual and physical abuse. I want to make that clear as well. In your case, it was very specific, but in this context, we're speaking about all abuse. Thank you so very much for coming on and sharing with us. Best of luck to you. Thank you so very much. We appreciate it. I know it took a lot of courage. And coming up, we're going to take a look at the psychological effects from a mental health expert a little later on in the program. But certainly we've got more testimonials and talking to someone who has helped start an organization to help others out there in need of help. Stay with us. On the Record continues. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Tonight we are discussing surviving the horror of abuse. One of the hardest things about being a survivor of abuse, whether physically, emotional, or sexual, it's having the courage to speak up about it. Many victims take secrets to their graves, remembering the pain and hurt of their story as they relive it in their memories. Joining me in this segment is Davina Smith, the founder of Save Our Daughters 242, a nonprofit organization, as we discuss the topic, surviving the horror of abuse. Davina, welcome to our show. Let's first of all start with you telling us a little bit about your organization and why it was founded.
Thank you, Jerome. So Save Our Daughters, the organization name is Save Our Daughters 242, and we've been in motion for about 4 years now. And the organization came about when I was a little girl, and I was molested at the age of 6 until I was 13. And I conceived a child by my molester. And growing up, it was really hard. And I didn't have anyone to, be there for me and to guide me and to believe me. And so I started the organization in hopes of shining light on these issues, because it is a silent killer. You understand? If you don't have that support system to be able to vent, it can tear you apart. It can destroy you mentally, physically, emotionally. And so the organization was geared towards encouraging and inspiring young women and teen girls to shed light on their issues and to help them overcome what they've been going through.
How do you actually reach out, touch, affect these young ladies? And is it just young women?
Young girls as well. Young girls, teen girls, start at the age of 8. We have a mentorship program for starting from the age of 8 to 25. And recently we've had a lot of women as old as 50, in their 40s and 50s, wow, 60s, that have been molested or raped, that just needed somebody to vent to, somebody to talk to be able to express what they've been going through.
How did your experience affect your life? And at what point did you decide, or were you able to, I don't even want to say move past it, but at what point did you step out of it and decide to, I guess, take hold of your destiny?
When I was about it was hard. I won't tell you no lie. It was really hard. Um, I won't say I'm over it completely.
Yeah.
But I learned to, I realized that what has happened to me wasn't my fault, and I am not what happened to me. And so when I realized that I'm not what happened to me, I began to embrace who I truly am. I loved doing makeup, and so that helped me along the way also. Because when I looked in the mirror, I didn't thought that I was beautiful. I thought that I was, dirty and filthy and not worthy of love. And so when I put makeup on or fix my hair, it made me feel good about myself. And so that helped me to really be able to empower myself to know that, hey, you're loved regardless and you're beautiful regardless of what you went through. And also my husband, God, rest his soul, he passed away 2 years ago. We've been married for 8 years before he passed away, and he's been a great help to me as well, showing me that I am worthy of love, and that what happened to me, no matter what happened to me, he still loved me regardless of that.
I gotta say, on a lighter note, I don't know if I can get the phrase right, but your face beat this morning, so or this evening. So whatever you're doing with that makeup, you're doing a good job at that. So that's working, boy.
Thank
Woo,
you. Thank
you are
you.
beautiful on that screen tonight. But let's talk a little bit though about your situation. I understand that police did not believe you initially, or is that correct?
Correct. I was told that I just want to be bad and rebellious by the police officer. I just want to be bad and be all about and be rebellious. They didn't believe me at all. They did not believe me.
And at what point did you become pregnant by your molester? Were you young when that
Yeah,
happened?
I was 13.
Oh,
I
Lord.
was 13.
And how was that relationship with the
Pardon me?
once how does one, let me back up a bit. How does one even begin to look after a child that was fathered by a molester?
Listen, it was hard, and it only could have been God. Only could have been God, because only could have been God to really show me how to love and to really look at that child and love that child unconditionally. Only could have been God. I don't know. It only could have been God, Jerome. That's all I have to say. It only could have been the grace of God to help me along the way to nurture and love that child unconditionally and to be able to protect that child.
And I applaud you for that, and God bless you for that. How do we begin to protect our children? How do we prepare them for possible abuse? And I know in your case you're talking about sexual abuse, but physical abuse is a major problem as well. How do we prepare our children and protect them? And not even just from a parental standpoint, because sometimes parents are complicit, whether they are aware or not. But how do we protect our children?
We have the conversations with our kids. We have to conversate with them and let them know that don't be afraid to talk to me about anything. Get them comfortable enough to talk to you about anything. We have to have these conversations of good touch, bad touch. Allow them to know the true names of their body parts. Can't be using words like cookie and Lulu and all those kind of names. Let them know the proper names of their body parts, so that when you talk to them, you can let them know that, hey, this is your safe space. No one's supposed to touch these areas. And if somebody touch those areas, you can come and tell mommy, you can come and tell Annie, you can come and tell Grammy, or whoever is responsible for that child. We have to have these conversations. And for too long we've been shying away from these conversations, and I think it's needed in this day and time. It's been needed, and we must have these conversations with our children.
Why are we so afraid to address these things? Why do we keep them so secret and even sometimes turn on the children?
I don't know. I'm guessing it that they're afraid of the response per se, because back then we thought that sex was a bad word. Saying the word sex was like you said, a really bad word, and we have to get our children used to saying, get them used to saying the word, sex, and talk to them about sex. You understand? Can't be afraid. So I don't know if it was from back then, years ago, where their parents wasn't able to talk to them about it, but in this day and age, these children know from young what it is.
Now, do we need to do more to make children aware, even the public aware? I mean, when I was young, it was say no to drugs. I came up in the time when HIV/AIDS was coming onto the scene. It was rampant, and there were all these public campaigns about protection and abstinence and all these kinds of things. And we talk about these are public health issues in many instances, and this has to be as well. But there's never been, as far as from where I sit, a proper public health awareness campaign. We don't talk about it enough. Do we need to really put it in people's faces a lot more?
Yes, sir. We sure do. Sure do. We have to. Because too many times these stories or these things have been gone unnoticed and swept underneath the rug. So I think we need to place awareness everywhere through our communities, in our churches, in our, everywhere we need to bring forth awareness on these issues and shine light on these issues.
How have you been able to help some of the women who have come through your organization, and what are some of the things that you've been able to achieve and accomplish?
Getting them to break their silence, getting them comfortable enough to be able to know that there is somebody out there that have been through the same thing that I have been through, and that they can relate to, someone that has gone through what they have gone through. I could say when I went before the pandemic came about, and we did visits at the Girls Industrial School, and I shared my story with some of the young ladies there, and to hear them ask, Miss Smith, how did you overcome that? I've been through the same thing. My mommy did that. My daddy did this to me. My uncle did this to me. It was heartbreaking. And when they came out of the institution, they would still keep in contact with me, and I was able to mentor them and still be able to, help them along the way. And we've been failing our children, man, because too many times, for instance, I'll use the girls' school as a illustration again. For instance, the child have been abused in the home, say they've been molested, and they send them they run away from home and they send them to the Girls Industrial School, right? For whatever period of time. And they come out, they place them right back into the same environment, then they become repeat offenders. They go right back into the Girls Industrial School. That's not helping them. That's not helping them at all. So we have to get to the root of this problem. Have to.
Do we need more safe spaces and safe houses and places for our children?
Yes, most definitely. Placing them in those kinds of institutions, that just won't do. We need more. We need more hands on deck. We need more safe housing. We need more.
And, from every time the story, or every time a Bella comes into the fore, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's both, and there is some allegation of a heinous crime, and there's all this discussion. And then 9 days later, we back to rowing but something again, and something else, I should say, and it falls off the radar. Why should this time, or how could this instance be different? What can we do differently to keep this at the forefront?
We have to speak. We have to get survivors out there that have been through to be able to shout it out loud, speak. Your voice matters. Get them to speak up, break the silence. That's the only way we're going to have change in this country. We have to speak out about it. We have to. We won't stop until we get justice for every other Bella out there.
But let's be honest, it's an embarrassing situation. I mean, you are at a place where you can talk about your experience, and others are at that place, but many are not.
Yes, totally agree.
And what do you say
I,
to them? What do you say to those people who say, I can't talk. I feel too embarrassed. I'm ashamed. I'm even angry.
I would say to them, don't be afraid. I feel you. I know where you're at. I was there also. Don't be afraid. You need to speak out. In order for you cannot confront something that you would console. You have to speak out. In order for you to heal, you have to speak. You have to speak out about it. And that your journey of healing begins when you release. You have to release that. Can't keep that on the inside. Cannot. So I would encourage you to find somebody that you can talk to and just speak out. Release it. Cry if you have to. Shout if you have to, but release it. Release it. That's the first step. You have to release it and acknowledge. Acknowledge that, hey, this has happened to me, but I am not what has happened to me. You have to release it.
Davina, I want to thank you so much. You said something that was so poignant there. In order to begin the healing, you must release. And that release even involves acknowledging. And I hope and I pray that your story, those of others, this discussion tonight will reach some people who will begin to acknowledge and release, particularly those who have been involved in these, well, whatever kind of abuse it is. So we hope that people will begin to come forward and to speak and to bring some healing to their lives. So thank you so very much. Thank you for the great work that you do. You look amazing. When my makeup artist go on vacation, I can call you in. You look you look amazing.
Thank you.
So keep up the good
Anytime.
work. Thank you so much. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to speak with a mental health therapist on this issue. Stay with us. On the Record continues right after this. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back. This is On the Record. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Tonight we're continuing our discussion on surviving the horror of abuse. The unfortunate reality in the Bahamas is that so many young women are reported missing, and instantly the public thinks she's willingly involved with an older man, and the derogatory names follow. The real question is, why would a young lady or a young man want to run away from home? What are the conditions that would push a minor out of that home? Joining me this segment is to talk, as we continue our discussion, I should say, on surviving the horror of abuse, is Jenna Christie, a mental health therapist. Jenna, thank you so much for being on with us tonight. Let's talk about some of the telltale signs that a child is being abused, whether it be physical or sexual abuse.
All right, thank you so much for having me. Some of the signs of abuse be very subtle. Majority of the time, they revolve around behavioral changes. I often say behaviors do not emerge out of thin air, whether it's due to a psychological reason or to an environmental reason. Some of the signs you can see would be appetite change, sudden anger and aggression, hostility, not wanting to be left alone or left with a particular person. Sometimes it's signs of depression, which is excessive crying. Uh, you can have doing harm. You can have persons who running away from you. All of these are signs, especially someone who was previously trained and now they're bedwetting. That's one of the biggest signs of particular sexual abuse.
And as someone who may be seeing this, whether you are another parent, whether you're a caregiver, a family member, what is your duty in reporting abuse? And I want to talk about abuse of all kinds. What's your duty in now bringing this to light when so many people think that it's really not my business or I don't want to get involved?
That is very common. We live in a culture where we want to know the tea, but we don't necessarily want to act on what we know. However, we are endangering the lives of children when we neglect to report these situations. There are certain professions, mental health professions, doctors, teachers, we are mandated reporters for abuse. But there's also a moral obligation to certain people. I know people who would have maybe been acquainted with the family under the most recent situation that has been circulating in the news. And they've mentioned that they saw certain things, but maybe they neglected to say anything. However, whether you're right or you're wrong, you can make an anonymous report to the child protection hotline. And it's not your job to investigate. It's not your job to bring forth all the evidence. It's your job to call attention to the suspicion because you had it for a reason. I believe we ignore our intuition far too often.
Now, as someone who knows these kinds of situations, once a child is a victim of abuse, what are some of the long-term effects that can take place? What are some of the issues that that child and later on that adult can face as a result of abuse?
As a result, without the proper intervention, our children are subjected to long term chronic depression, issues with anxiety, issues with positive relationship dynamics. A lot of our adult relationships are plagued with issues that stem from our childhood. You can often find anger management issues, from anger management, substance abuse issues, you find legal problems. It's a very common segue into the criminal justice system, which we like to avoid. You find people who have been abused are being abused in their adult relationships as well. The cycle of violence just continues and becomes worse.
How do we, well, let's back up a bit. Um, in this discussion, we're talking about physical and sexual abuse. But when we talk about the sexual abuse side of it, a lot of times the perpetrators are older, they are known to these children. Are so many there's so many dynamics there. How do you, as the parent, as the caregiver, whomever, seek to protect the children and prepare them even for the possibility of all of this? I mean, an earlier guest would have talked about the fact that when it started, she didn't really know it was abuse. She just thought that was something that the family member wanted to do because they loved her.
I think it's very important to explain and to understand yourself as an adult what a healthy relationship looks like. I think that is something that has been missing from the conversation in our households is that we make the assumption that it's okay. But if you look at it, would it make someone else feel uncomfortable? That is it, because a lot of the abuse does not start just physically or sexually. It starts mentally and emotionally. So the grooming aspect starts long before it usually physical implications happen. So I think it's very important for us to understand healthy relationships, understand what is appropriate and inappropriate, and have that conversation with our child that We should not have secrets between the two of us. The common trait of those who do inflict violence is that it has to be a secret. Don't tell anybody our little secret. And that should be one of the biggest red flags is that if I cannot willingly share this information, that is something that maybe I do need to tell because it could be a problem.
We also live in a society where we see a lot of violence towards women, young girls, and women will tell you for them it's all that is perpetuated in society. As men, we're taught to treat women differently, not as equals but as possessions, and we do whatever needs to be done to lord over them. Is that a societal issue?
Very much so. And it's going to take a lot of work in individual households to change that narrative. I don't know if we will live to see the society that we want to see where men are not treated as possession. But it is a societal issue that can only be started with conversations with our young men and our young boys to understand that women are property, that women are to be treated as equals because they're human as well.
When we opened the segment, I mentioned the fact that you have missing persons reports from time to time of young girls in their adolescence who go missing and then reappear. We obviously, not obviously, we automatically assume that she's out with an older man or doing something with older men. Is that a common issue? And how are, why does that continue to happen? Why is that even seen to be okay in a society?
Unfortunately, it is something that I know I have commonly seen within my practice. However, I think the reasons behind it is what needs to be clarified. A lot of people make the assumption that our young girls go because they're looking for a good time. They just want to be all of these labels that are placed on the young ladies, when a majority of the time you can actually look and see family dynamics at home are very poor, communication between family members are poor, abuse and neglect. And when you really look at it on the surface, it's more of a survivalist technique than anything. And there's so much emphasis being placed on our young girls who leave their homes looking for love, affection, looking for a way to survive. And there's not nearly as much attention being placed on the older men who groom these girls, house them, and give them false promises and portray themselves as a father figure who's willing to give them more of a relationship capacity. So they're looking at this man and seeing, okay, you are a father, but subconsciously they're not understanding the nature of the dynamic that's occurring between.
Jenna, Christie, we want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. This is an issue that runs so deeply, that is so pervasive, but unfortunately only really comes to the fore when the results are disastrous. And so we thank you for your ongoing work, and we hope that this discussion continues, not just because of this instance, which is heinous in and of itself, but because this is something that we continue to we must address as a society. So thank you for the work that you do. We appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming on and speaking with us tonight. Folks,
Thank you so much.
our last segment is up next, right after this quick break. Stay with us. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. This is our final segment in our show tonight. We're discussing surviving the horror of abuse. The unfortunate death of 4-year-old Bella has created a national conversation. Is it time now for the National Sex Offenders Registry? That question has come up once again. In this fight, the legislation in place to govern the penalties for abuses is important. It sets up the tone and can help individuals think twice about committing a crime. Well, joining me in this final segment is Altida Bowles. She is the detective inspector from the Royal Bahamas Police Force who deals with these kinds of crimes. Let's begin, Inspector, by really talking about how pervasive this issue is. We normally don't hear about cases of abuse until they become very extreme, until a child is seriously hurt, or unfortunately it ends in death, or somebody goes to court for some kind of heinous act. But how common are these types of crimes?
Child abuse crimes are very common, and like you said, you really don't hear about it until it's really severe, that it's brought to the public. It's been going on for a while. We've had families that really didn't report the matters because this is how they grew up, and they felt that it was okay to punish their children that way. But we've taken a proactive approach to Royal Bahamas Police Force, ensuring that we bring all of these matters to court.
What constitutes abuse? Because growing up, when you did something, you got spanked. You got a severe beating, but we didn't see it as abuse. What constitutes, let's start with physical abuse. I think it's it's a little easier to define what sexual abuse is, but when do you cross the line into physical abuse?
Well, I always tell individuals, as society evolve, we should evolve as well. And so when we used to beat our kids or
Get beaten.
Get beating, yes, with all type objects. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to sit here and say that was right. We charge under cruelty to children. Now, what is cruel? What is discipline? When you're disciplining a child, beating them to the point of breaking a limb, that is not discipline. That is an assault. We would charge a stranger for doing that to another individual. Mm-hmm. So cruelty, you're beating to the point where you're beating like an animal, a stranger. You're not trying to discipline that child. You're assaulting that child. You have kids that lose organs, limbs. That's not discipline. And back in the day, yes, that used to happen, but no one reported it.
How difficult is it to really prove abuse in children? And again, I'm talking about the physical abuse at this point. But how difficult is it to prove that abuse? And how do you find out about it? Because if I'm the parent and I'm the abuser, I'm not going to come and tell the police. But how hard is it to prove that? And where do most of your reports come from?
I would say we've gotten better as a nation as reporting abuse. Mm-hmm. Most of our reports come from individuals that walk in. We have some that come from social services, but we have a lot of reports that come in from individuals that observe their family member being abused or a neighbor. So that's where we get most of our reports.
Let's talk a little bit about the sexual abuse and how pervasive is that, and how are those reports dealt with?
Sexual abuse is common, and when we're talking about children, especially now where we're doing school online, you have a lot of kids that have time on their hands with little to no supervision by adults. So they are involved with individuals their age or individuals who are adults are taking advantage of them. Those matters, when those reports come in, we would take the statement from the victim to substantiate the elements in it to substantiate the offense. We will also assist them to the hospital if the incident is within 72 hours. If it is not in 72 hours, they will be seen at a clinic. And this is for the purpose of collecting forensic evidence to assist us in investigating our matter. We also would do extensive inquiries as far as recording witness statements, anything that could help us build a case. And then we will go forward as it relates to collecting our suspect.
Children, there's always the innocence of the child, and you're relying in some instances on children to tell you whether something has happened or not, whether it's physical or sexual. How much weight does that carry, and do you have instances where adults are falsely accused, and how do you get to that?
We usually use Dr. Lucky. She works at the crisis center. She's a psychiatrist. When we have younger kids and we feel that maybe they may not know the difference between a lie and the truth, or understanding body parts, we would have her complete a forensic interview with that child, and she would submit a report on their behalf. But usually a child that comes into our department, they are aware of what's going on and they can tell us. There are rare occasions that we have to use Dr. Lucky for her to really give us a report to say, this actually did happen.
So children are very in tune. Is it time for us to have a sexual offenders registry?
To my knowledge, sir, we are in the process of working on the sexual offenses registry.
How would that help?
The sexual offenders registry, for me, it would assist us in knowing who are the offenders out there, and the public. The public needs to know to some degree who is living in their neighborhood. When you hire individuals at schools who have our kids for so much of the day, the administration needs to know that this individual may be a predator and should not be around children. So I think in taking those proactive measures would assist us greatly in eliminating some of those reported matters.
Some children are put at risk by people who are brought into the home. It could be a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a husband, a wife who is not that child's parent. It may be another family member or someone who is staying in the home. We all, know of instances where there are extended families. How do you protect your child in the home as that parent? What are you looking out for? What are the telltale signs of abuse?
Definitely, Jerome, we've had these situations over and over. And some of the signs of abuse is that individual who probably was outgoing, that child, is now withdrawn, isolated, or sometimes they become very, we would say, rude, speaking back to parents. You would find them engaging in substance abuse. You may even find them cutting on themselves because this is a cry for help. Or, like the young lady said before, that, there are attempts at suicides. So the signs are there, and the individual that is abusing them, they usually do not want to be around. For some reason, you wouldn't know, but they have a very poor attitude towards that individual and do not care to be around them.
As a parent, whether you're a single parent, whether you're divorced or separated, what is your duty in protecting that child? We hear of it all the time where somebody, new enters the home and that child is now exposed. As that parent, what is your role in protecting your child or your children?
As a parent, you should know what type of individual you're introducing into your child's life. Before you introduce that individual into your child's life, you yourself should personally get to know them. There are telltale signs of what type of individual that person may be. And I would not suggest for you to rapidly introduce this child or move this individual or move in with this individual. We used to think it was just girls, but it's both sexes now.
Well, that's why I said children. I
Yes.
didn't differentiate in the sexes. Yeah.
Exactly. So we really need to engage in finding out more about this person. Do your own investigation, ask around. You know, most of the people, you look how they would treat their children if they had children. Most of the time, if you ask around, you are going to get stories. I'm not saying you should listen to them, but if there are red flags, take caution.
And then, of course, be mindful, as you said, of people that you introduce very quickly. If you suspect abuse, if you know of it, if you fear of it, what do you do very quickly? Who do you contact? Where do you go?
You can contact social services, the crisis center, any police department, CID, and we will deal with it. So.
Tell someone, say something. Don't be silent.
Exactly. Everybody has a duty to report if they suspect child abuse, they suspect somebody has suffered from it or is suffering from it. Everyone.
Inspector Bowles, thank you very much. You have a very difficult job. I just have to tell you, this is not my first encounter with you. I don't know how you all do it. Just sitting here has been a lot for me. So thank you. Continue to do the good work that you do. The country thanks you for it. We need more of it.
Thank you.
Hope they're listening. You need more resources.
Yes, sir.
That's going to do it for this week's episode of On the Record. Special thanks to all of my guests and my technical and production staff. We'll see you again next week, same place, same time, right here. All right, just sit still for a couple minutes, a couple seconds. Thank you, that was